Skyrim is... You know what Skyrim is. If there's one game that needs no introduction, it's The Elder Scrolls V. The game's been relevant for almost a decade now, so there's plenty, maybe even dare I say too many, in-depth reviews, video essays, and 2-hour analysis videos by British dudes that use the word fundamental a lot. Yes, a lot of the points people make nowadays are stuff we've all heard before, regurgitated over and over again, but now it's been a year more since the last time we heard it. But even so, the sheer volume of content created around this game, the number of careers birthed around Skyrim content just goes to show how much there is to say about it. Love it or hate it, or pretend to hate it because everyone loves it, it's silly to not recognize at least the qualities that make it one of the most influential RPG games ever made, and definitely the most recognizable RPG title of the past decade. And a lot of people online seem to have a problem admitting this for some reason. Like, whenever you mention the game in a positive way, someone's always ready to jump at you from the bushes to tell you how inferior your taste is. It's almost like they're mad that others enjoy something strange. But you gotta remember who makes up a majority of Skyrim's 30+ million sales. It's not gamers arguing on forums about how Morrowind had better RPG mechanics, it's people like you and me who just play things they enjoy. Unless you're one of those people, in which case... shoo. So today I thought it's high time I add my little drop to the ocean of Skyrim videos, because
my opinion matters.
I don't think the world needs another the adjective noun of Skyrim, so today I want to do something different and talk about why no one's been able to replicate Skyrim's appeal in the past 10 years. Now, this should go without saying, but pretty much nothing goes without saying on the internet, so I'm gonna say it anyway. What I'm talking about here is the charm of Skyrim. It's what makes the game so appealing to so many people. I'm not saying it's the best game, I'm not saying it's the best RPG, I'm not saying whatever it takes to not say to avoid comments like, actually. This is all my opinion, and it's okay if you disagree with me, so let's just jump into it.
They put us off here and left without us. He died a few days later.
I've probably clocked in more hours in Skyrim over the years than any other single-player game. Why? I'm not a fan of medieval-themed anything. In fact, I always thought it was a boring, overused aesthetic. I've never been a big fan of RPG titles either. Now I am, but when I first got obsessed with Skyrim, it was pretty much the only RPG game that managed to grab my attention. To me, these things show that there's something else to this game beyond the standard description of medieval fantasy action RPG that drew me to it. A really fun fact about me is I was a broke bitch growing up. I got into gaming at a young age, but over time I couldn't keep up with the specs necessary to play new stuff, so I had a period of around a good decade where I could pretty much just stand on the sidelines watching other people play all these games on YouTube and cursing God himself for not giving me a gaming PC. During this time, a lot of great shit came out. Some games I was already a huge fan of, like Assassin's Creed, others were brand new exciting IPs, and of course Skyrim was somewhere in that mix. I kept a nice little neat list of games I'm gonna play if the universe ever blesses me with a computer. So by the time I became an actual self-sustaining adult and saved up enough money to buy one, guess what?
Come on, guess!
I didn't care about any of those games anymore. Except one. The first game I installed on my brand spanking new RGB boosted Falcon Scorpio Mega Thunder Crusher PC was, of course, Up by Academy Big Bouncy Booby Babes. But this is a video about Skyrim, so my fondest memory of this game came before I could ever even play it. I was at a friend's place and I was watching him play, and I remember the moment he came across a giant in a random field. Just spontaneously running across something so insane in an otherwise ordinary looking world felt so surreal and fascinating to me. He wasn't there as a prop for me to find, he was just minding his giant business, just doing whatever the fuck giants do, dragging his giant balls across the land. Over the years that I was unable to run games, I've seen lots of epic gamer moments, but this was the one that stuck with me. Years later, when I bought my PC, the fascination was still there. I had no problem getting lost in this world that would be considered ancient by this point. I had no problem shitting my pants the first time I came across the inconspicuous Dark Brotherhood door randomly without knowing what it was. You know how when a shitty mobile game advertisement says, "Take command of a legendary hero to fight epic monsters and save the epic galaxy," not a single one of those words gets you excited? Skyrim doesn't need to tell you what an epic journey you'll embark on. It's one of the few games that manages to make you feel it. And how it does that is, I guess, the key to finding out why no one else has done it. Now, there's obviously some incredible games that have come out since that many, including myself, would say are better than The Elder Scrolls V. There's also a ton of games directly inspired by Todd Howard's crowning achievement. But in this video, I'm specifically focusing on things that made Skyrim such a long-lasting, industry-defining phenomenon, which very few other games managed to become. So to get this out of the way first, it's not fucking mods. I think mods get way too much credit for the success of Skyrim. They absolutely help with the longevity, and Bethesda has great mod support with the creation kit, but lots of other games have mods and they ain't shit. Throw mods onto a pile of garbage that no one wants to play and it becomes a pile of garbage that no one wants to play, but you can now not play as Uganda Knuckles. If you look at the casual community, mods are just cumbersome. I didn't even think to install mods on my first playthrough, and a lot of people I know are the same. Yes, this is all just my own experience, but what I'm trying to say is, even if you do play with mods that don't completely overhaul certain mechanics, I don't think the reason you're playing is because of the mods. There wouldn't be so much effort put into developing them, often for no monetary gain, if the game itself wasn't already pretty cool. I think attributing Skyrim's success to mods is just taking away from the core of the game that allows for the mods to be fun. And yes, I know Bethesda sucks now and it's easy to dismiss their achievements, but I want to give them credit where it's due. So what is it that makes up that core? Honestly, you know my ADD ass can't keep up with most stories in games, so I can definitely confirm that it's not the story. I think one thing that stands out whenever you ask someone why they love Skyrim is the atmosphere. I usually spend whole videos on atmosphere, go watch those by the way, but this time I'm gonna try to keep it brief. Visuals, music, and exploration. These are things that give Skyrim its distinct soul. Cities feel familiar and cozy. Nature feels vast and mysterious. Making a world look good is one thing, making it feel good is a much more difficult task. The world of Skyrim is not only pretty, it's also composed beautifully. Forcing your poor deadbeat horse up the side of a mountain is rewarding not only for the something that you'll inevitably find there, but because of the grand, majestic scenery you'll be put in the center of. This is all aided beautifully by the iconic soundtrack composed by Jeremy Soule. Not much to say about that, you don't really want to listen to me describe music, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. When that ooh shit kicks in, you know you feel it in your bones. This makes exploration feel serene and calming, makes you want to spend time in that world. And the best way of exploring the world is to just wander around aimlessly and get sidetracked whenever you set out to do a quest. This works because any direction you pick has something waiting for you. You're not even incentivized to explore purely by loot. It's the unique locations and experiences that are arguably more worth it. You don't know what a random hut across the hill is hiding. You don't know what path a random conversation will take you on. Corny as it may sound, the memories you create by exploring stick around with you much longer than the cool sword you found. To be honest, I haven't played the game in a while and this senile old brain forgets most of the specifics, but the reason I even wanted to make this video were the vibes that still stick with me very vividly. I think your character not speaking also helps quite a lot with the immersion, which is something not a lot of people mention. I love feeling that quiet sense of loneliness and isolation in games, and I think controlling a whole ass predetermined personality would have made that more difficult. So music, visuals, exploration, vibes, immersion, blah blah blah, none of this works in an inaccessible world. This is where I think the secret to Skyrim's massive success lies. The balance between width and depth, one so optimally achieved that it allows for the largest potential audience to enjoy all of those fundamentals that make the game appealing. Make a game too deep and you risk alienating all but the most hardcore of players willing to put in the time and effort to learn the complex mechanics. make it too wide, and it's easy for its elements to lose weight and meaning because you simply can't put proper care into developing all of them. Of course, both of these are important and work with each other, but a general sentiment among gamers is that depth is a little more important than width. It's better to have a smaller game that does a few things but does them right, rather than a game that does a lot of things but isn't really super focused on any of them. And I generally agree, I think. I mean, it sounds like that's how it should be. But then again, do I absolutely love coming home to a frankly shell of a human wife that only repeats the same few lines?
Hello, my love.
And a daughter whose only purpose is to strip me of my belongings?
You're back! Did you get me a present? Yes, Paul.
Fuck yeah. Is yoga an essential part of GTA 5? No, of course not. Can you enjoy the game without it? Absolutely. But does it add a sort of validity to the world? I think it does. There were a lot of things to complain about in regards to the Cyberpunk 2077 disaster, but something I've seen mentioned more than you would think is the minor, non-essential stuff, like how not a single arcade game is playable. This goes to show that people, even if subconsciously, actually care a lot about things that could be considered just pointless with, and that the number of things you can do also contributes to the world being fun, even if those things aren't too deep in their own right. I think the depth versus width discussion is not that simple, and one is not inherently better than the other. Imagine this as a scale, because unless you have infinite time and budget, you can't have both maxed out. Depth gets more credit because it can work better on its own. Like, you would rather eat a tiny serving of a Michelin star dish than a bunch of half-cooked ingredients. But I would say that they're both equally as important in giving the finished piece that crazy mass appeal. Remember when I told you to imagine a linear scale 3 seconds ago? Well, now forget that because it doesn't really work with this next thing I'm gonna say. How about pick a few core things to fully flesh out and develop, and then spend the rest of your time and budget on expanding the scope with lots of fun surface level activities and mechanics. I think this is better than trying to make every single thing present in the game worthwhile, and in the process spreading yourself out too thin, resulting in nothing really being worthwhile. People fucking love just having a useless dumb dog follow them around. I don't need to be able to interactively pet different parts of his body, have a selection of 500 voiced nicknames for him to choose from, or a side mission where I built him a rocket and sent him to space. Just put dog in game and have dog follow me around and get in my way. And yeah, if joining the Thieves Guild was a quintessential part of the story, I would have been disappointed that there's not much to do in it, but it's not. It's just one of the many options the game gives you. It's one of the many ways you can say you built your character to be, and the quests that get you there are completely different from the Dark Brotherhood quests or the College of Winterhold quests, so you can say that it's a unique experience, gameplay wise, but especially role-playing wise. Just the concept of being able to turn into a vampire or a werewolf is insane enough to be exciting in itself. It doesn't have to be deep, layered, and interconnected with everything else to leave a strong memory, something that you'll remember happening in the game years after you've done it. That being said, people underestimate Skyrim's depth. I've seen the game described as being wide as a lake and deep as a pond. I don't know, wide as a wide body of water and deep as a shallow body of water a lot over the years, and I don't really think that's true. I mean, the core systems are pretty solid and they don't get enough credit. I want to avoid getting lost in the specifics because I'm trying to discuss the bigger picture and you've already heard most of this shit before, but the skill tree lets you see real, tangible progress and gives you a feeling that every perk point matters. Sure, a few skills and maybe even entire branches are either useless or could have been handled differently, and I have no problem admitting this, but there's still plenty of substance there to enjoy and mess around with. To say that this many upgrades, none of which are that incremental, oh your fucking silver daggers under 4 inches that begin with the letter D deal 0.02% more damage now, have no depth to them, is simply bullshit. You can certainly box yourself into a playstyle and have a hard time switching down the road, but I mean, that just sounds appropriate. A master archer can't become a two-handed expert overnight. Just boot up a new save and shape your character differently. There's also a fuck ton of armor and weapons to collect, and they all have more than enough variety with all the possible enchantments. And the designs are some of the best I've ever seen in games. Like, seriously, how does Skyrim still get me excited to flex that ebony drip? How does it still manage to look epic after so many years? How does this look better than those 10 times more pimped out armors from like Chinese MMOs. Okay, I've been dreading this moment, but should we talk about combat? Alright, I'm gonna talk about combat a little. Okay, straight up, shit literally feels like when you're trying to fight in a dream. Even though I personally, by some miracle, enjoyed it, I still think it sucks balls. However, I don't think it's all bad. Yeah, you get almost zero feedback and you look like you're fighting air during the actual process of combat, but there's still quite decent variety to how you can approach it. It is possible to have different builds depending on how you want to play. You can be a stealth archer or... yeah, you'll just be a stealth archer. But there's also one-handed, two-handed, light armor, heavy armor, block. Has anyone actually ever used block? Block is uncharted territory, it's still not quite clear what it does. Magic is an obviously inferior way to play, but it's not because magic is not deep enough, it's just not balanced well. Your magicka drains way too quick, and that naturally pushes you to use weapons from the beginning. But can you say that it's not insanely cool? You can shoot lightning, ice, beams of fire, balls of fire. You can heal yourself, make enemies attack each other. Using magic but feel like swinging a sword for a bit? Summon a fucking sword then. You can summon goddamn transcendental beings called Dremora Lords to fight in your stead, or just an ice golem or something. There's so much shit you can do with magic, and all of it is fun. Hey, we heard you like magic, so we put magic in your magic so you can magic while you magic. Appropriate meme for the time, shut up. Shouts! You're the son of a dragon, you can just say some random shit and blow people away. There's a ton of shouts and some of them have multiple words, so the power gets stronger. All of these are crazy unique and not a single one is not satisfying to use, be it actually useful in the game or not. Feeling bummed because you just can't summon enough things with magic? Summon a fucking dragon using a shout. The words power fantasy don't do this shit justice. Okay, I said I wasn't gonna get into specifics and then started getting into specifics. Smithing, enchanting, and alchemy. Not too deep, but they do what they're supposed to. They allow you to smith, enchant, and alchemize. All three cooler than they get credit for, by the way. Lockpicking is lockpicking, pickpocketing is pickpocketing, both actually pretty satisfying to do in my opinion, to the point where I feel like there's something missing when an RPG doesn't let me be a slimy little thief. The skill branches even offer some very cool upgrades, like being able to poison someone by planting poison on them through pickpocketing. Again, options. Speech upgrades can be very useful, like you get better prices and shit, but the actual speech mechanics and dialogue are lackluster, and stealth is awesome. You can pretty much become an invisible, overpowered killing machine. How long were you stuck on that character creator deciding what race to pick because it felt like it mattered? How excited were you to find Blackreach, a whole ass underground city adding even more depth to the already masterfully crafted map? How excited were you to come home and rob your wife off her business profits?
We have a cozy little profit. Here, this is your share, love.
How much time did you spend picking up every little thing you were purposefully allowed to pick up? Reading books, decorating one of your houses, and hoarding cheese wheels in your living room. These are things that create memories. These are things that make Skyrim wide. People say the RPG part of Skyrim has been dumbed down from previous games. Yes, good. Development is not only adding to the previous iteration, it's also trimming the fat, streamlining things that could use it, even though there's always going to be people who prefer it the old way. And I admit, it was probably fun as fuck to literally jump across the whole map in Morrowind using broken acrobatics. What I'm trying to say in this video is that Bethesda achieved the perfect balance in Skyrim between wide and deep, simple and complex. It's still very much an RPG, just one that's not overwhelming and inaccessible to casual players. Sure, if you're a big RPG nerd, you'd probably prefer a more complicated skill tree, leveling system, classes, and stats, but even so, I think you can still enjoy a slightly less complex version of all that, whereas someone who's not as big of a nerd as you would feel put off by a bunch of words and numbers to keep track of. Yes, that someone may or may not be me, and I may or may not be making this video exclusively to justify my inability to get good. Skyrim is one of my favorite games of all time that I probably wouldn't have even gotten into if it was any more deep than it is. Like, I'll probably never get into something like Divinity Original Sin. Okay, so now that we've established Skyrim's secret formula that obviously worked, let's talk about why no one else has done it since. First thing that's always a factor when something blows up is timing. Kinda abstract, difficult to define, and impossible to predict. It's a big question whether that exact same game would receive any attention if it came out today, and one that I can't answer because how the fuck should I know, but it's evident that the world was just ready for that kind of game at that time. 2011 was also a very different time, and even memes lasted longer back then. People were making arrow to the knee jokes and Fusro Da edits for literal years after the game came out. I guess there were just fewer things back then, so the focus was on them longer, whereas nowadays a low-res silhouette of Saddam Hussein that was poppin' last week already feels ancient because we now have a low-res drawing of a mushroom. And if thousands of cringy fellow kids brand accounts that didn't even exist back then aren't any indication, memes can be quite a good form of marketing and help keep the thing relevant. Of course, we're talking about longevity here, so even though the timing helped with putting the game on a lot of people's radars, it is not the only thing that makes a successful game. The most obvious reason there aren't more studios trying to repeat the Skyrim formula is that it's just too expensive. Forget how technically challenging the game is or how difficult it is to put together on a creative level, you can't even try to do this if you don't have enough money. Skyrim is a huge game with around a $90 million budget depending on your sources, making it one of the most expensive games ever produced. This just isn't a feasible undertaking for a huge majority of studios. It pretty much eliminates every indie because if you can spare 90 mil for a game, you aren't really indie anymore, and leaves us with only the very few industry giants who are even capable of producing a game like this. Which is a problem because unfortunately in the current gaming space, indie studios are really the only ones trying anything even slightly innovative and different. It's a big bummer, it sucks, but AAA studios just don't take the same risks anymore. With the gaming industry growing to such an astronomical size, there's just too much to lose for all these big corporate entities to try to experiment. Now, if Skyrim has a formula that's guaranteed to work, how is it a risk to try to repeat it? Well, yes, you can put together the things that made the game so successful and call it a formula, but it's one that's much more difficult to clearly define and reproduce than that of Assassin's Creed, Fortnite, or Call of Duty. It's one based on feeling more so than statistics and numbers, and to have a whole team share the understanding of that feeling becomes much more difficult the more a studio grows. You can put everything that makes Fortnite successful on a bulletin board, have 1,000 people read it, and come up with Apex Legends or Warzone, but if you do the same with Skyrim, those 1,000 people will likely all interpret it differently. Everyone has their own idea of what these feelings that Skyrim nails so perfectly actually entail. Bethesda only had around 100 people working on The Elder Scrolls V, and I think this went in their favor. Not saying a bigger team can't all be on the same page, but it probably requires quite a lot more management. Obviously, I know next to nothing about the internal operations of a studio, so I'm just talking out of my ass here, but the reason I think this is because we've seen it happen time and time again, that a studio grows in size and their games become shit. Bethesda ironically being one of the examples. These studios that have been around for a while usually have really cool origin stories where it was just a group of people genuinely passionate about their work that organically grew to a sort of sweet spot where they put out their best games, but then they grow beyond the friends who all know each other working from a humble office on their passion projects phase. People who made the previous games leave, new people come in, those new people can't work well on old foundations, there's investors who only care about their returns, pressure is put on the devs with deadlines, maybe the studio is even acquired by a bigger studio, which means more restrictions, even bigger focus on numbers as opposed to feeling, etc, etc, etc. Also, apparently every big studio in existence has a toxic work environment full of harassment, crunch, and discrimination, which is, I guess, what happens when things become corporate and no one but the devs is actually there for their passion towards gaming. Big companies are soulless, and this is apparent in their games. If there's literally 15 studios working on Assassin's Creed Valhalla, can every employee put love and passion into their contribution, knowing that it's actually a significant one? At that point, no matter how much you love games, you're nothing more than a replaceable cog in the machine made to pump out formulaic content. Your unique ideas and input aren't required. Listen, there's big studios putting out amazing games, but for a game to be amazing today, it doesn't need to break the mold. It needs to do what a good book or movie does. Have a heart-wrenching, relatable story, memorable characters, and a pretty setting. But games have so much more potential than that. Books and movies are pretty much the same as they always have been. The medium itself doesn't evolve. The author just creates a new thing of that same thing. But gaming adds so many more interactive layers to storytelling. I don't want to see gaming as a medium plateau when I know there's an infinite amount of potential yet to be discovered. So many new, bizarre, unique forms of that thing that is a game to be created. As much as some people may not want to give it credit for it, Skyrim broke the mold and pushed the medium forward, at least a tiny step. We don't know what the next thing will be that hits all the notes that Skyrim did, but we at least know there's one studio working on creating the next Skyrim, and that's Bethesda. Whether it's Starfield, which has been described as Skyrim in space, or the actual Elder Scrolls 6 coming in 2069 probably. Let's just give them the benefit of the doubt for now and keep our fingers crossed that they've learned from their previous mistakes. Thank you for watching. I know I said in the beginning that it's okay if you disagree with me, but I've changed my mind. Commenting is forbidden if you disagree with me. I want a total echo chamber in the comments so I can sleep sound tonight. Also, I never ask for this, but share the video somewhere. You don't even have to subscribe or whatever. If you like the video, just do me a favor and share it. Thank you.